Hello and welcome to a Tuesday night edition of the Managing Madrid podcast. We are live on Zoom with a bunch of patrons, and I am your host, Kiyan Sobani. I'm going to be joined by Matt Wiltsey in a second here. We are recording this on the back of Real Madrid's 1-0 loss to PSG, and I can tell you, I probably speak for the entire fan base where I'm really disappointed. I'm embarrassed. To be quite frank, I don't know if I've seen Real Madrid play that bad, probably since our last Champions League elimination. That was against Chelsea, where I really felt that we were completely out of our depth. We were outplayed all over the field. It was no comparison. I thought we were physically outmatched both in this game and in the PSG game, and the Chelsea game rather. And there was a lot that Carlo Ancelotti got wrong, and his justifications in the post-match press conference did not really do a good job of explaining what went wrong, and it really felt like he doubled down on his belief system. And now it's one thing to say that publicly. I really care little about that, to be honest. What I really care about is, can we actually fix some of these issues moving forward in the second leg? We've seen second legs be dramatically different than the first legs in the history of football, whether it's Real Madrid or otherwise. But I think it was also disappointing the fact that we saw an entire first half, 45 minutes, where we saw a lot of problems, and it was very clear that Real Madrid needed to fix a bunch of things. And unlike the Villarreal halftime speech, there wasn't one against PSG. And it didn't seem like there was a tactical shift. It didn't seem like Real Madrid improved. In fact, I would argue they got worse somehow. And that's saying a lot, because I thought our second half passing was, I'm not sure if it would have made a difference if Matt was there or I was there or Arvin was there on the field. I don't think it would have mattered. I think if was there, it probably would have mattered. But Matt and I would have held our own, I think, against PSG. But I personally, quite frankly, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed by the performance. I was embarrassed that for a lot of people who don't watch Real Madrid play week in, week out, especially all these pundits who came in hot and heavy, saw us perform like that, shriveling in a shell of ourselves against PSG, and were played off the park. And it was really disappointing. I was really disappointed, and it reminded me of Chelsea. It reminded me of Ajax. It reminded me of Manchester City. And unless we really dramatically improve, honestly, I would not be entirely surprised if we saw something similar to the Ajax humiliation at the Bernabeu a couple of years ago. But I'm sorry. That's just how I feel at the moment. That's my raw emotion. Maybe I'll feel differently tomorrow. I doubt it, but it was bad. So sorry, Matt. Should have introduced you sooner. Welcome to the show. How are you feeling after that?
Yeah, I don't think any of us are feeling great right now. It's just so many poor performances on an individual level too. And I think, like, Carvajal alone, you talk about embarrassing performances. Carvajal alone was really embarrassing out there. He looked like he didn't belong at that level. It looked a step too far for him. It almost, I hate to say it, but he looked like a retired player, just how easily Mbappe was burning him. And yes, it's Mbappe. He'll do that. He can do that to anyone, but it just, the gap between him and Carvajal looked massive tonight. And it wasn't until Militao provided some additional support that we really started to see, at least we started to limit Mbappe's influence a little bit. But I just feel like Carlo Ancelotti went into this game. He had a game plan. He wanted to sit back. He wanted to absorb pressure. And he wanted to counter. The problem was the players didn't execute, because we had Kroos and Modric unable to play balls to Vini or Asensio out wide and exploit that space behind Ashraf and Nuno Mendes. And then we sat so far deep that anytime we actually got the ball, PSG just counterpressed, and we couldn't figure out how to play out of the back. And so it was just on all levels, from the players to Carlo to everything in between. It was just really, really poor.
I mean, it's funny. Like, we spent so much time. We didn't do that much written content. I wrote about them here and there, but we spent some time on the podcast talking about them. We watched a lot of PSG this season. We all pointed out their tactical weaknesses. We said that their front three don't press, even if Mbappe and Neymar and Messi aren't all on the field. Whoever is in the front three, generally they don't press that much. They've had a lot of tactical holes, and then always, like, to me, I just kept going back to, none of this might matter. All of this scrutiny, all these weaknesses we're pointing out, if they go to another level because they have to in a bigger game, it won't really matter. And it happened against Manchester City when PSG faced them earlier this season, and it happened against us tonight. And I just thought the gap between both teams was staggering. And I mean, like, when I go back to that Chelsea games, those Chelsea games last season, in a lot of ways, like on aggregate, it could have been much, much, much worse because I really felt that Chelsea played us off the park last season. And I felt similarly tonight. I felt like 1-0, even like when it was 0-0, I was like, I couldn't believe. I was like, this is incredible that we've kept this to 0-0. This is like somehow we've shithoused our way all the way to the end, and it's 0-0. And in some weird, twisted way, when Mbappe scored, I actually felt a little bit of relief. I know that sounds really weird to say, only because I feel like maybe Carlo will start to wake up and be like, okay, that wasn't working. Like if we take a 0-0 from that game and go into the second leg 0-0, and by some horrific way, like Carlo comes away from them like, okay, we kept them 0-0. We'll keep playing this way. Maybe this forces us to just play something different. Anything would have been better than today. We got lucky that it was just 0-0. I mean, like Courtois saved us. I was looking at the stats and I couldn't believe. Like I knew that they dominated. But then you look at the numbers. I'm like, Messi had 8 shots. What? I don't even remember that. I remember more like a lot of giveaways. We couldn't pass. We couldn't string any passes together. Every time we got the ball, it was just a panic. Someone was just kicking the ball away. There was no coherent passing. There was no way to escape their press. And again, maybe the press was something that didn't account for. But again, we have all the tools to be a press-resistant team, but we just couldn't deal with their press. And even in moments where we didn't have pressure, just looked like we were flustered. You looked at Carvajal's performance, and you said he was bad today. I thought this was probably the worst Carvajal game, maybe that I can remember. If I had to go really far back, Juventus 2015 was the one I thought of, but I thought this was worse than that. Because this one, he just looked completely out of depth, and he just also looked like panicky also. There was a couple moments in the first half where no one was around him. He forces these passes to nobody, and PSG come roaring back on the counter. I thought PSG were perfect. I mean, like position apart from scoring, but like positionally, even in like moments where we intercepted the pass, we won the ball. We were never in position to win the 50-50 loose balls. They were there to pounce. So we could never actually capitalize on winning the ball because we gave it right back to them and they would come in numbers. So positionally, I thought they were great. Like anything on the right side, that Carvajal, Asensio, even Modric was poor. Mendes and Verratti was fantastic in just tracking and basically doing everything. I felt like he was like in 10 positions at once today. Mendes really impressed me. He controlled that wing. I really thought on our wing, as important as Mendy was to make it for this game, because the alternative being somebody else, I don't think would have been good. But I also thought Mendy just didn't look right today. And I don't know what you thought, Matt, about our fitness levels in general. Because it's one thing to say Mendy and Benzema didn't look right and didn't look fit because they've been maybe rushed back. It's another that I just don't know. Physically, I just felt like we were completely out-muscled in every aspect. I don't know if you noticed that, if you thought there was also a physical component to this, in addition to the tactical gap.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there were multiple times where I thought Carvajal just got easily shoved off the ball, and it wasn't just Mbappe. Like there were times where he was in a 50-50 duel with Verratti, and he just got stiff-armed off the ball. And it wasn't just him, though. It was everyone. And I think you look at this, and pound for pound, player for player, PSG won all of the battles. Ashraf and Danilo versus Vinicius, they won that battle. Di Maria versus Mendy won that battle. Mbappe Carvajal obviously won that battle. Nuno Mendes versus Asensio won that battle. So you look all across the field, PSG were superior to us everywhere. And you brought up Nuno. I was so impressed with him. I see now why we were linked with him. 19 years old, left back, bossed this game. Nobody got by him. Rodrigo, Asensio, I mean, they caused him absolutely no threat. He constantly bombed forward. He was an outlet out wide. I was very, very impressed with him. I think he'll be one of the best left backs in the world shortly. And so you look at what PSG did, and we've talked about, think back to you mentioned, Keon, how PSG pressed. They turned on the press. Like today was probably the best they've ever pressed this whole season. And we talked about how, look back at previous Champions League finals, Real Madrid versus Atletico Madrid, the second final where we went to penalty kicks. I'm sure everybody remembers that one play where Ronaldo sprinted from the 18 all the way back to our 18 to track down Griezmann and make that slide tackle. Like big players in these types of matches are willing to put in the work. and maybe PSG in a casual Ligue 1 game or whatever it may be doesn't want to do that tracking back and doesn't want to implement the press. But in these types of matches, those big stars are willing to do it. And that was the difference. Like, we could not, they suffocated us. We couldn't play out of the back. And we played, I don't know what this new goal kick routine was that we kept trying, but we just kept bombing it up the field to absolutely no one. And then PSG would pick it up and come right back down our throats. So I don't really understand this direct thing we were trying today, because it didn't work at all.
Where to start, man? I this was really from top to bottom just horrific. I can't believe, like, and these are, it's disappointing too, because in a lot of ways these are the games we look forward to. These are, like, all season it comes to moments like this. It comes to nights like this that we're willing to sit through the entire season for, just to see us play in these games and hope that we have gained some momentum, some rhythm. You can't convince me. I have no proof of this, but I'm looking at the field. This is all eye test. This is all just me looking at the players and what their physical state is. You can't convince me that fatigue was not in some, like, way involved today. Like, we kept saying in November, December, we kept saying these players can't be running to the ground. They may not look tired right now, but when it comes, when it matters, it's going to take a toll on the players. And I just felt like you could see that today. That famous, like, 16-17 season where Zidane had the A team B thing. I mean, like, that's an extreme example where a manager really relies on his bench completely in a lot of games. But I mean, you just saw, like, everybody was fresh. Everybody was fresh when it mattered in those big games because they had so much rest. You said so many things I wanted to touch on, but I mean, one of the things this comes down to ultimately is that if your plan is to absorb pressure from PSG and hit them on the counter, which in theory, by the way, is not terrible. You know, we've seen Real Madrid and Carlo Ancelotti blitz teams on the counter on big Champions League nights before in the past, and it's worked. But when you can't, like he said after the game, we were good defensively, which, by the way, is just a lie. We were not good defensively. This is we look at the eye test and the performance and the process more than the result. It shouldn't have been 1-0. It should have been much more. But that aside, he said the biggest problem was it's not that the front three were tired. It's that the front three didn't get the ball. We were giving the passes away. While that's true, we have to, like, ask ourselves, like, why were we so incompetent in doing that? And that simple thing, because even with Vinicius and Benzema and Asensio, Vinicius probably the most, at least trying to come back and get the ball. They had no options moving forward. They had no way to escape the press. They were all sitting so deep. Again, positionally, they were in no way able to actually muster anything in transition and gather a counterattack. It wasn't until the 20th minute I actually noticed Vinicius on the field, and it was for a defensive challenge on Di Maria. It was not for an offensive thing. You fast forward, 45th minute, just before the stroke of halftime, Casemiro, a header wide from a corner kick. That was our very first shot, our very first threat of the entire game in that moment, our very first shot. All of Benzema, Asensio, and Vinicius had less than 15 touches. I think they had 14 apiece, all three of them at halftime. By the end of the game, maybe they grew into a little bit more, but nothing worth noting or anything significant. In fact, the entire 90 minutes, we had three shots. One from Rodrigo, one was that Casemiro header, and one from Toni Kroos, which was from yards. I think it seemed like 35, 40 yards out. I remember seeing that one. I have to look at it again. It's one thing to be terrible defensively, which I disagree with Carlo. I didn't think we were good defensively. And it's one thing to go in a low block. But if you go in a low block and you can't defend and you can't counter and you can't get anyone the ball, and you're getting outworked physically, and you're getting flustered, and it's just like, it's just a really bad place to be in. I don't know what to tell you. I was really disappointed today, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point you brought up right there is we played in a low block. Okay, fine. But if you're going to play in a low block, then you need to be devastating on the counter. Like, we see teams that can do this, and then they just rip through you on the counterattack. And we've done it ourselves. And today, there was no threat whatsoever offensively. Zero, you mentioned it, 0 shots until that header from Casemiro late in the first half. That was our only corner kick. We had one cross the whole first half, and it was an incomplete cross, didn't hit it to anyone. It was just there was nothing, absolutely nothing. I can't even think of one good moment in the first half where we kept possession or had a nice counterattack, good progression through the middle of the field, whatever it may be. Didn't exploit the space. There were countless times where I saw we could have easily exploited the space that Ashraf had left behind, and we either missed the pass or we just played it safe. That's what really frustrated me, was how often we played it safe. We would just pass it back to Courtois and put Courtois in difficult situations. He would then play it to Militao, and Militao would just be pressured and have to hit it either up the field or out of bounds. And that I felt like that was on rewind. It kept happening over and over and over again. And so it just, like, even guys like Alaba, I felt like what he's in the team for is part of it. It's not the only thing, but part of what he's in the team for is his progressive passing and his ability to break lines from the back, even if he's being pressed. And I just felt like he was so safe. He was so safe. He played it to Courtois nearly every single time. And whether that was because they felt like they weren't able to play out of the press or they didn't have options, I don't know. But Mendy, countless times he choked up the ball in the first half. He was just a huge liability on the ball. I even think to that pass that Cruz played to him where he tried to chest it and chested it out of bounds. There were just moments like that where little things the team could have done better. Maybe take a little risk in your play, try and go forward, be vertical. And instead, we always went with the safe route, and it actually put us in under more pressure rather than helping us achieve the goal of retaining possession and trying to build up the field.
Well, I mean, even to the Alaba point, like the passing from everyone was bad. Yeah. One of the staggering thing was, to me, like when you watch that first half in particular, one of the few times we actually got up the field, like I'd say one of like 3 times we actually got up the field in a meaningful way, was through Militao carrying the ball because he had no passing options. And like that can't be the game plan. Like to be honest, like Militao was one of 2 people in my opinion that can hold their head high tonight. Yeah. Him and Courtois. But to rely on him to carry the ball like 30 yards is insane to me as the game plan. I don't like Asensio has to be more present in that situation. And again, like Modric and Kroos, maybe we can be more lenient towards just because they're Modric and Kroos and they've done so much. But they struggle to find outlets too. It was really tough. And I think the other thing that was tough to watch for me, Matt, is the fact that Ancelotti's reaction to this was just to not react. There was no response, no reaction. Not at halftime, not in the 65th minute. When Bale comes in the 87th minute for Benzema, you're like, I just had to laugh because, like, what's he going to do in 3 minutes? What was Benzema doing in 87 minutes? And again, to Benzema's credit, I don't even know if he was healthy in this game to even play. I'm just thankful he's not injured or relapsed. What we can talk about is the fact that ironically, the 2 players that needed to avoid suspension got suspended for the second leg, and that is Casemiro and Ferland Mendy. And we have to talk about that as well in this game for the second leg, how you set up, because that worries me in the sense that if we're going to put Camavinga as the 6 next game, that worries me. If Ferland Mendy has a bad game now, that's one thing, because maybe we can chalk it up to lack of fitness or whatever. But to not have him in the second leg when you assume he'll probably be back into match rhythm and healthy is worse. So, I'm sorry, man. I hate to be so doom and gloom. I'm really disappointed, man. Like I don't know what to make of this. I just don't know if I truly have faith in Carlo to turn this around and actually react in the proper way. Again, the only silver lining for me is that we have to, and that's what we have going for us. We can't play like this again because we're down a goal. I wanted to. Well, it looks like you're about to say something, but I have so many questions for you. But
no, go ahead.
Okay, well, much was made of like these English pundits saying that the taking away the away goals rule has killed the incentive for away teams, and they pointed to this Real Madrid performance, not really fully knowing that this is how we would play against Elche, even if there was away goals on the line, because they watch Real Madrid play once a year, and that's the problem with these generalists, right? They watch Real Madrid play like once a year in a big game, and then they're like, and they pretend like they've been watching the whole time. Do you think having the away goals rule would actually have changed the way we played tonight, or no?
No, I think Carlo was going to play on the counter no matter what. I think what was surprising, and maybe this wasn't what Carlo wanted, but it's just the way it's just the repercussions due to the way PSG were playing is we sat so far back. Like we were really sunken in. We were just outside our 18, if not in our 18 most of the time. And so I'm sure Carlo didn't want us to play that deep. And but if there were away goals, knowing Carlo, knowing how we played all season since that Sharif game, like after the Sharif game, Carlo totally ditched the press and just decided we're going to play counterattacking football. We're going to take advantage of Vinicius' speed. We're not going to push Kroos and Modric, who are in their latter stage of their career, to try and be pressing machines. We just don't have the midfield, the legs to do it. We'll take advantage of our team a different way. So since then, we've really been a counterattacking team for the most part. And so it didn't surprise me, this setup. But again, it's just so poorly executed. And a large part of that credit goes to Pochettino and PSG. Like, I think Pochettino this was a masterclass. This was a masterclass from him. He got it all right. The way he set up the team, the way they took to his instructions and implemented the press. And I mean, in midfield, we had nothing. Coming out of the back, we couldn't build out. And then the one space where you would have had opportunity, I think Owen put a snapshot on Twitter, and you see Benzema dropping deep, and Marquinhos is a little bit unsure about what to do. And so he kind of follows Benzema, and there's a huge gap in the middle. We're pinning the fullbacks wide with Asensio and Vinicius. If somebody just makes a run through that mid, whether it be a late arriving run through midfield or Asensio or Vinicius kind of doing a curling run through the middle of the pitch, that would have been on. And if we could have just formulated some sort of counterattack, that would have been on time and time again. And it makes you think you talked about us looking off the pace and just physically not being there, not being able to compete. It just makes me think this game was tailor-made for Fede Valverde, whether he had to start in the right wing or in midfield, whatever it should have been. He could have been just a fourth midfielder in there. Honestly, I was thinking about it at one point. I would have even, I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but I would have just played him in place of Benzema. And he would have, I wouldn't have him as like a target striker or anything, but I would just have him as a fourth midfielder, put Vinicius and Asensio maybe a little bit narrow and let them just make runs off the back line. And Fede can provide that those extra legs in midfield. And if we do decide to press, I mean, Fede's a pressing machine. And if he's going to hound the center backs and Paredes at defensive midfielder, there's no one better to do that.
I thought you were going to say Dani Ceballos. And, you know, to be honest, like when you say Fede Valverde, and the reason that Dani Ceballos even entered my mind was that I was just begging for anyone to show some balls and fight and just put some heavy challenges in and show some tenacity, show some bite, you know, show their fangs and just fight a little bit. I do agree in principle that Fede Valverde would have helped with the energy. I mean, that's kind of what he's known for, right? There's something else though. There was something different today with everyone, I found. And like there was something like there was fear. I felt that there was fear within us. There's no other reason like we're panicking and giving the ball away, even when we're not. Like it's one thing to talk about those pressing sequences that PSG had, the man-to-man press, the fact that we had no outlets coming out of the back, but that wasn't every sequence. There were plenty of sequences where that didn't happen and we actually got into the opposing half, or we win the ball and there's like these transition opportunities. You see all of a sudden like Modric is in a good position to receive a pass on the counter, Vinicius on the flank ready to go, Asensio gets the ball and he just kicks it to somebody like without even looking. Like there was fear, there was panic. Asensio, by the way, like, my God, like we can criticize Carvajal all we want and he was bad.
He was a zero. Yeah.
But he might as well have literally had Arvin out there on the right flank in front of him. And there was no help from Asensio defensively. There was nothing Asensio was doing offensively. His passing was terrible. He was not in the game at all. When he was in the game, it was just him giving the ball away. Just a complete zero on the right wing. But again, this was very much a structural, tactical problem as much as it was a problem of fear, a problem of players underperforming on an individual level. It was everything, like a mess. The only thing I think we can say we did reasonably well was I thought we took away Messi's space centrally. Like we clogged the central channels to a decent extent. It was really like the wings that we got burnt most and the pressing. And like when you look at the matchups on the flank were just one way. It was Mbappe and Mendes versus Carvajal and whatever was existing of Asensio on that right wing. And then you had Hakimi, Di Maria on the right side. I mean, you mentioned Danilo too, but like Hakimi and Di Maria together, their pressing ability and the speed at which they can get, it's not easy to get by Mendy. But Hakimi could just do these 1-2s with Di Maria, run in behind and get the ball on the through ball. And it was just an easy way for them to beat Mendy, and their pressing was great. Mendy, for the first time in a while, I thought looked really uncomfortable under pressure. This is, by the way, this is why we keep talking about press resistance in Champions League games. This is not. It's not just we're just spewing bullshit. It's because literally this is how we get eliminated in the Champions League now. It's high pressing. We haven't been able to figure it out. That's why we keep talking about it. And these are the nights where it matters to be the most press resistant. And these are the nights where we've kind of left the field with our tails between our legs. So we need to figure out the press. We need to figure out a way to get higher up the pitch. And we just need better performances from a lot of people.
Yeah, and the other thing that Di Maria and Ashraf were doing so well was they were almost doing this yin-yang on their runs. So if one would come centrally, the other would go wide, and it was impossible. Mendy and Vinicius weren't communicating well, and so they weren't passing the marks on. So Di Maria would start go from his wide position, come centrally into the half space, and then drop to get the ball. And so Mendy would start to follow him, and then at the last minute see Ashraf, who was doing the opposite run. He would come from more of a narrow position, then go out wide and just keep going higher, higher, and higher. And so Mendy would get caught in two minds and ultimately decide that Ashraf is the guy he's got to mark because Ashraf's going to be more dangerous. But then Vinicius was too late to get on top of Di Maria. And so they were constantly doing those kind of inverse runs, and it was a nightmare for those two, and they weren't handling it well, especially in the first half. And this is like the first time and yes, he's just coming back from injury, but we talk about a nightmare for Asensio and Carvajal. I thought it was a nightmare for Mendy as well. I mean, I think he was pretty poor. He got beaten by nearly everyone that came up against him at the end of the game there. Mbappe even burned Mendy. So we've finally seen Mendy get burned and beaten 1v1 pretty easily. So yeah, for me, that was like just major standouts. And I tweeted something before the game. I was like, there's plenty of plot lines to look at in this match because it's our first big tie, first something we can look at. And I listed all these out. I was like, look, we can really see how good Real Madrid is. Are Militao and Alaba the pair that we think they are? And I think you look back after the match, yes, they are. I think Militao comes out of this looking phenomenal. Like you mentioned, Kian, he can hold his head high. I thought Alaba was pretty good, just a little reserved in his passing.
He was Alaba was probably the third best in the game. Yeah. But there's a gap, I think, from 2 to 3 probably.
Yeah. So, but they were solid. They held their own. Then the second question is the Casemiro, Modric, Kroos midfield still able to compete at this elite level where it's so physical, where it is this pressing team? And tonight, I would say no. And we've kind of seen that with Ajax. We've seen that with Chelsea. We've seen that with how many of these teams now? The Kroos, Modric, Casemiro midfield hasn't really been able to compete. And even during the Zidane days, we needed a fourth midfielder in there. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. And then the other question I had was, is Asensio ready to start a UCL knockout level type game? And is he ready to be kind of a star, not necessarily a star, but an important contributing factor and warrant his starting position? And the answer tonight was absolutely not. Absolutely not. He was a zero. And I think my other question, which I didn't have enough tweet characters to fit, was would Vinicius be able to cement his role as a superstar? Like, these are the types of games where you need to come alive and you need to be a big name player. And he was completely locked down today. And you would think that it's a mismatch between him and Ashraf. And even in the moments where it was him and Ashraf 1v1, I thought Ashraf pocketed him defensively. Like, he won those duels. So
I just couldn't believe, like, there was a point, like, I think in the 75th minute, and I was looking back, I was like, I just can't believe we haven't had a single attack. There wasn't like a Vinicius attack in this game. There wasn't one. I think there was like one where he kind of gets into the half, but then he just dribbles into trouble. He kind of just spills over the ball himself. It was just weird today. Like, man, I agree with you. You brought up some great points. Like, all these questions are valid questions that need to be answered. The Casemiro Cruz midfield trio. This is now year 4 of eliminations since the Liverpool game, the Liverpool final, or year 3. Chelsea, Manchester City, Ajax. This is 4, right? Yeah. Forgive me for speaking of this as an elimination, but this one really felt like it was so bad that, like, Casemiro, Cruz, Modric together, it's, it may be one thing to go through a string of La Liga games and make that work. But there's just, I don't know if I think there's a lack of dynamism. There's a lack of mobility to some extent. If you put a young Modric in there, there's all the mobility in the world. But this version of it, I think there's a lack of dynamism and athleticism and physical ability. And I think that's where you hope that Camavinga can grow into something, right? Which leads us to the question. Well, let me hold on. I don't want to jump the gun yet. What would your changes have been at halftime? Looking at the way the first half transpired, would you have made a tactical shift or a player shift or both?
I would have both. So I would have swapped out Asensio and put in Fede Valverde. And then I would have kind of almost like we saw from the team talk from Zidane in the UCL final, I guess it was 2017, where you saw him say, like, we need to take a step forward. We need to be a little bit more aggressive. Fullbacks, you step forward. That's what I would have asked us to push our line forward. We were sat so far back. Yes, we can keep this game plan, but let's not sit in a low block. Let's sit in a mid block at least. And maybe we can find little trigger moments where we press and we go. You don't have to press the full 90 minutes or the full second half, but find little moments where you can kind of change a gear and press and put them and take advantage of Fede Valverde's physicality in his legs and Vinicius' physicality in his leg. I probably would have replaced Benzema as well. I don't think he was a net positive for us. He was clearly still injured. I don't think he should have started this game. I would have, if we wanted a little bit more control, then I guess you could have put Isco there. He's been fine. Everybody knows my thoughts on Jovic. Given that we were playing long balls, I think Jovic, a guy who can bring it down with his chest so easily and just be a target man like that, would have been fine. I think if you wanted to press a little bit more, that's not his main asset. So you could explore some other opportunities, but I just don't think I don't think Benzema was fit enough to play this game. And so I probably would have taken him out. And then, I think some of those tactical tweaks I mentioned, and then to your point, Keon, show some more bite, show some more, like, we need some intensity in this game. We need something. Somebody get stuck in a challenge and send a message. Like, I know those are all cliches and those are all like, they can often be made fun of, but sometimes you just need that to get the team amped up a little bit and, like, get them into this game. We needed something I always remember Jose Mourinho would purposely, like, get yellow cards and red cards or things like that because he was trying to amp the team up and he was trying to, like, just get into their psyche and, like, make them feel like it's us against them. And sometimes it didn't work and sometimes it pissed us off because it ruined the image of Madrid and, like, it just wasn't a good look. But other times it worked. It was just brilliant and it worked and it would get the team going. And I felt like we just needed a little bit of that today because it was just so flat.
I agree 100%. I look for this stuff too in these big games because in these big games it's not just about tactics. It's more about character. It's more about, that's why superstars rise to the occasion. That's why you pay Mbappe the big bucks for moments like that. That's why in the past Real Madrid have won so many Champions League titles, is because, like, we need to put our foot on the pedal. We need to, like, literally just take them and pin them against the wall and choke them and actually go at them and go again. Like, you can't just sit back and be so passive because then you're relying on heroism and individual defending and chaotic just mess. Like, everything we did tonight was reactionary. It wasn't. We weren't imposing our will. We were reacting to everything we were doing, and our reaction was just to go for slide tackles and challenges. Carvajal being late, committing a penalty, being late on everything and relying on Militao and Courtois to save the day. Everything was reactive. It wasn't imposing. We need to impose our will. So if I don't want to go out like this. Second leg, let's just go at them, pin them, go into the final third, bring the line a bit higher, get the ball to Vinicius on the flank, let him actually dribble and provoke and get some heavy challenges on him. Then you let, maybe some fights ensue. You let Alaba get heated. You let all these things happen, but go out like that. Go out fighting. Go out with some honor, man. Because to me, this was not a way to go out. If we're going to play the second leg at this, I almost don't even want to watch it. And we have to do a complete 180 shift. I don't think it's enough to sit in a low block and just play better than we did. I think we really need to do a 180 on them, a Uno reverse card, and try to beat them at their game, which is if it's a pressing issue and if your legs are tired, then go with I hate to say it, but if Casemiro's suspended, this is kind of an opportunity to test some stuff out. Put Cruz as the anchor. Put Camavinga in a box-to-box role and let Camavinga go at them a little bit, or Fede in that position, or even Isco, or put an extra midfielder. If we're not getting any production from Asensio on the right wing, either take away the right wing and put a fourth midfielder like an Isco who can control and help you control, or a Fede Valverde who can do a bit of both. He can bring some aggression on the wing. He can play narrow defensively, but he can also go out on the wing when Real Madrid win the ball. Go that route. I don't want to see Asensio in a Champions League starting match again in my lifetime, to be honest, after that. I don't trust him. I trust him to bring some energy off the bench in certain games where Real Madrid maybe are facing a high line. You need some energy. I trust him to do that to an extent. I don't trust him to have our season on the line and you need someone to show up and show their balls. I don't trust him. I don't want to see him start in the second leg. I really don't. Count me out on that. At least give me another option. If it's a honest opinion. I want to know if anyone in this podcast agrees. You can type it in the chat. Matt, you can tell me. I would have rather have seen Peter on the right wing today, man. Peter wouldn't have been as scared as Asensio in a game like this. No way. Peter would have defended. Peter would have gone at Mendes a little bit more. I'm tired of seeing Asensio there, man.
Honestly, he was a net zero. I'm at a loss for words for Asensio's performance, just because this is a guy who at the start of the season was complaining that he wasn't getting minutes, was complaining that he deserves to be part of the starting group. He stayed. He rejected all these offers, apparently, because he was told he was going to be an important contributor. He finally gets the continuity he asked for. He's been playing fairly well. Still some games where he's really quiet, but he's been getting some goals. He's almost at double-digit figures. But these are the matches where you can make a statement. These are the matches where you say, yes, Real Madrid, I'm demanding this renewal. I'm demanding to continue. I'm going to make it impossible for Mbappe when he comes to try and take my spot. He's going to have to find another spot. These are the games where you can really cement yourself. And he did the exact opposite. And I hope Real Madrid think long and hard before renewing him, because it's just, let's say we are bringing in Mbappe, knock on wood, hopefully that does happen. But where does Asensio fit in that regard? Is he going to want us to take a back seat? Is he at this stage of his career, looking to renew with Real Madrid and just kind of be in a comfort zone? Because he's not going to win that position with the way he's playing. And I just don't think we've made this mistake. We saw today the repercussions of our decisions from however many years ago. Ashraf was phenomenal and Carvajal was just a ghost, a retired player. He looked like an ex-player out there. And so that's the repercussion from our decision however many years ago to not bring back Ashraf. Yes, we say it's the pandemic, but we probably could have sold Carvajal for 20-30 million at that time in his career.
That was literally a few months ago, by the way. It wasn't a few years ago. We had Ashraf a few
2020, wasn't it?
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
We sold him. We sold him in 2020.
You're right.
So what I'm saying is, at that point, Carvajal wasn't, he was starting to be on that injury. His injuries were starting to come through, but I don't think most other clubs, there were probably some Premier League clubs that would have taken him for 20-30 million. Yes, it's not 40 million that you got for Ashraf, but I think it would have been enough. And we made a conscious decision there. And I think hopefully the club kind of reevaluates some of these decisions again, and we have to maybe be a little bit more ruthless in the future.